They thought she was just a harmless village girl. But the moment she arrived in Abai, the skies shifted ever so slightly. The sun dimmed, not in darkness, but like it had suddenly remembered something tragic. And the birds stopped singing. The day Akalugo walked into Abai, no one knew where she came from. She wasn't born in the village. She wasn't anyone's cousin. She didn't come with a man or a cart or a wedding band. She just appeared. She walked barefoot down the red dust road with only a small bag over her shoulder and a piece of palm frond tied to her wrist. Some said that palm frond was for protection. Others whispered it was for warning. Abai was not a big city, but it had grown from a sleepy village to a chaotic town with yellow buses, cement buildings, and a market that buzzed day and night. But even among motorcycles and loudspeakers, her presence slowed time. Men stood still. Women blinked harder. Children, they just stared. She passed by a group of boys playing cards near the betting kiosk. One of them, a boy named Alhaji, dropped his sachet water and just stared at her until his friend smacked the back of his head. "Guy, wouldn't they worry you? You know they see fine girl before." But Alhaji didn't respond. His eyes had gone glassy, like they'd touched something far away. The local barber, Chuka, leaned on his door frame, chewing gum. "She get good shape, Shah," he said, low enough for only his apprentice to hear. The apprentice laughed. "She go chop like the rest." But Akalugo heard them. She turned her head slightly. Her eyes met Chuka's, just for a second, and in that second, his gum fell out of his mouth. That night, she found a room behind Mama Akudo's canteen. A small one-room face-me-I-face-you unit with a broken window and a mattress on the floor. She paid 3 months' rent in cash. Mama Akudo asked, "My daughter, you sure you want to stay here? The bathroom now struggle, and neighbors too like talk." Akalugo nodded. Her voice was soft, almost like it came from beneath water. "I like it here," she said. That was all. She spent her first day walking through the market, buying little things. Beans, pepper, a small pot. People watched her like she carried a mystery on her back. And maybe she did. That night, the first knock came at her door. Chica, the palm wine seller. He came with a small gourd and nervous eyes. He smiled, rubbed his hands together, and leaned close to her door. "Akalugo," he said. "Just came to check on you. Hope you're settling in well." There was silence. Then the door creaked open. He stepped inside. He never spoke of what he saw in that room. But the next morning, Chica was different. His right hand shook. His voice cracked when he spoke. And when anyone asked him what happened, he just laughed nervously and said, "She's something else." He stopped selling palm wine 3 days later. They said he now sits near the old mango tree, staring at the sky, whispering her name like a prayer or a curse. And that was only the beginning. The first whisper didn't come from a woman. It came from an elder. And in Abai, when an elder speaks in half-sentences and blinking riddles, the ground itself listens. It was Elder Nkem, the oldest man in the village. He had seen the war. He had seen the missionaries. He had seen what they left behind. He sat at the back of the council hut, chewing bitter cola and watching flies buzz around the pot of audrey someone left out. His back was bent like a tired question mark, and his eyes were like dried wells, deep, empty, and quiet. On the 4th day after Akalugo arrived, Elder Nkem cleared his throat during the council meeting. "I smell it," he said. The room grew silent. Even Chief Uwakwi, who was halfway through a story about zoning land for a new borehole, stopped talking. "Smell what?" Papa Nkem, one of the younger elders, asked. The old man spat out the cola. His lips trembled. "Something not born of this soil." That was all he said. But that was enough. Because in Abai, when an old man says something like that, you go home and lock your windows, even if it's 2 in the afternoon. That same evening, 3 strange things happened. First, one of the goats tied in Mama Ejima's backyard vanished. No blood, no broken rope. Just gone. The knot was still tied to the stick. Second, a trader named Nonso found a mirror under his pillow when he returned home from the market. The problem? He didn't own a mirror. And the one he found wasn't ordinary. Its glass was cloudy, and the frame was carved with symbols no one could read. Third, the air changed. That's what people said. "The air day do somehow," said Aya Bose, the woman who fried akara near the park. As if breeze day passed through spirit. Some blamed the weather. Others blamed the power outage that kept the entire main road dark for 3 days. But those who had been around long enough knew better. Something had entered Abai. and it had started to spread. Now let's talk about Mama Akudo. She owned the compound where Akalugo lived. She was in her 50s and never afraid to talk. But on the 5th night after Akalugo moved in, she was afraid. Very afraid. She said she heard music in the corridor. Soft flute music, like the kind you only hear during burial rites. But no one else heard it. She opened her window and saw Akalugo sitting cross-legged in the yard. Alone, under the full moon, with a bowl of water in front of her and a feather floating in the middle. The next morning, Mama Akudo packed her things and went to her sister's house in Upper Abai. She said she needed space. When people asked her why, she only said, "Sometimes, beauty is the devil's disguise." But still, the men kept going to her room. One by one, a man named Nadazi went in on day 6. He never came back out. His wife, Ebra, screamed all over the village that night. But when the neighbors kicked down Akalugo's door, the room was empty. No Akalugo. No Nadazi. Just a bowl of ash on the floor and a mirror leaning against the wall. A mirror that reflected only darkness. And so, the whispers began. She's a spirit. She's a mommy wada. She's the devil's daughter. She's a curse. But still, some men didn't care. They said, "Let me taste and see." And taste they did. But what they saw could never be unseen. Some said he was the first. Others said he was the first to speak. But either way, Obinna entered that room on the first night, and something inside him never came back out. Obinna was not the kind of man to fear anything. Tall, smooth-skinned, with a mouth full of charm and a wristwatch that always sparkled under sunlight. He was known in Abai as chairman for women affairs. Married twice. Divorced twice. He didn't hide it. He always said, "Fine girls come and go, but Obinna go always remain." So when he heard about the new girl who just moved into Mama Akudo's compound, he laughed. She get 2 heads? He said while sipping star beer under the mango tree with his friends. "If she find past my ex, make thunder strike me." His friends laughed. Even though they were secretly afraid of her, Obinna's confidence was a comfort. So that night, Obinna took a bath, sprayed his imported perfume, the one he saved for special occasions, and walked barefoot to her room. He didn't knock. He just placed his palm flat on her wooden door, and it opened by itself. No creak. No wind. Just quiet. What he saw inside that room, only he knew. But from that night forward, Obinna was never the same. Witnesses said they heard nothing for a long time. Then, around 3:27 a.m., a scream, short, sharp, and quickly swallowed by the night, shot through the air. By morning, the neighbors gathered. The room was locked. Obinna's slippers were still outside. His wristwatch, the one that never left his body, lay cracked on the ground. When they finally broke the door, they found Obinna curled in a corner, naked, eyes wide, pupils like 2 dark holes. His mouth was open, but he didn't speak. Not even when the pastor from God's Fire Revival Ministry poured olive oil on his head and shouted, "Speak in Jesus' name." Nothing. Just trembling. He didn't respond to his name. He didn't eat. He didn't cry. He just stared, and sometimes whispered a name none of them could understand. Asha Lugo. His family took him to Legos the next day for prayers and psychiatric review. He never returned. The room? Empty again. Akalugo was gone when they opened it. No bag. No sign of life. Just a cracked mirror and a half-burned feather in the middle of the floor. But by nightfall, she was seen again, walking back toward the market, as if nothing happened, as if she had just gone to fetch water. That was the first night. And even though Obinna didn't die, people said he saw something worse than death. Sometimes, curses don't scream. Sometimes they hum. That was how it began with little Ibuka, a 10-year-old boy with wide eyes, dirty knees, and a habit of digging holes behind his mother's stall while she sold dry fish and pepper. It was a Tuesday, hot and dry, the kind of day when flies gather in your ears and refuse to leave. Mama Ibuka was busy arguing with a customer over the weight of dried stockfish. "Madam, a beg. If you no one buy, leave am. 9,600 per measure." While she gestured with her elbow, Ibuka had already snuck behind the stall, his favorite digging spot. He had no reason. He just liked digging. Said it helped him hear the earth. Nobody listened. After all, he was just a child. That day he dug 3 holes. The first one was empty. The second had a stone. But the third held something. It was small and round, like a cowrie, but blackened, as if it had been burned. It was warm to the touch. And when Ibuka picked it up, it hummed. Not loudly, not even in sound. The vibration came through his fingers, then into his chest. He dropped it, then picked it up again. And this time, the humming turned into a whisper. Aku na achib gi. A voice. Not a child's voice. Not a man's voice. But something in between. Ibuka didn't understand the Igbo words, but he heard them in his bones. That night, he took the charm home and hid it under his pillow. That was when the dream started. The first dream. Fire. Tall, blue fire dancing in the middle of Abai Market. People running, screaming. But Akalago, standing calmly in the center, barefoot, with the wind playing in her scarf. She looked directly at him, in the dream. The next morning, Ibuka didn't speak. Not to his mother. Not to anyone. He just walked to the back of the market again and began to dig. This time, not for fun. This time, like he was searching for more of something. When they asked him what he was doing, he said, "She told me there's more. She said I need to find the rest." Mama Ibuka slapped him that day. Which she? Who told you? You want to run mad? Ibuka didn't cry. He just smiled and whispered a word that made his mother's hands shake. Akalago. That night, Mama Ibuka took the cowrie and threw it into the latrine. She thought it was over. But the next morning, the cowrie was back under Ibuka's pillow. Dry, humming. And he had drawn a circle on his wall, with charcoal and palm oil. Inside the circle, a girl's face, with storm gray eyes. The people of Abai only go to Madam Adi when medicine fails, when the hospital can't explain the fever, when the pastor's holy water won't chase the shadow away, when dreams follow you into waking hours. And so, when Mama Ibuka whispered to her neighbor that her son was seeing things, it didn't take long before the story reached Madam Adi. The old woman didn't blink. She only nodded once, like she'd been expecting it. Madam Adi had been Abai's chief dibia for nearly 40 years. They said she spoke to spirits the way you and I speak to rain. They said she once healed a man who had been blind for 12 years using only sand and pigeon feathers. But even Madam Adi was afraid of her own dreams. Because the night before she heard of the cowrie, she had a vision. Not just a dream, a vision. The difference? A dream dies in sleep. A vision follows you into your life. She had fallen asleep beside her fire, the scent of burnt herbs thick in the air. At exactly 2:43 a.m., she sat up suddenly, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. In her dream, she had seen a tree, a tall, ancient irako, the one that stood behind her shrine for centuries. But in the dream, it was on fire. Not red fire. Blue. Blue flames licking the trunk, the branches, the sky. And in the center of that burning tree, a girl stood calmly, smiling with gray eyes. Akalago. She held something in her hand. A skull. But not a real one. A skull made from cowries. Its eyes glowed, and when she opened her mouth to speak, no words came. Only laughter. Laughter that wasn't hers. Laughter that sounded like hundreds of mouths speaking at once. And behind her, men, dozens of them, walking into the fire, naked, smiling. One of them had Obina's face. Another looked like Nadazi. One looked like Madam Adi's own late son. They walked into the fire willingly. And Akalago didn't stop them. She watched. She laughed. She burned. When Madam Adi woke up, she was soaked in sweat. The fire in her hearth had gone out. And her irako tree, the real one, had 2 blackbirds perched on it. Birds she'd never seen before. Their eyes were red. Their wings folded like cloaks. She didn't say a word to anyone that morning. But she did something strange. She tied 3 red cloths around her tree, then drew a white chalk line in front of her shrine that no one was allowed to cross. And when someone asked her why, she said softly, "Something is returning to Abai. Something we buried a long time ago. This girl, she is not alone. She's a doorway." And then she added, "Pray your sons don't knock on her door. Because once you enter her room, your soul forgets its name." They called him Alhaji, though no one could confirm if he had ever been to Mecca. He was not a Hausa man. He wasn't even Muslim. But he wore white jalamiya, always smelled of sandalwood oil, and owned the only transport line in Lower Abai. Alhaji had money. And in Abai, money meant power. Men respected him. Women feared him. Even boys who washed his Hilux would whisper, "No allow him vexo. Alhaji gets spirit." And so when Alhaji heard about the girl with stormy eyes living behind Mama Akudo's canteen, he smiled and said, "Let me test this thunder everyone is running from." He had heard the rumors. Obina, Natazi, the mirror, the goat that vanished. He didn't care. He had seen worse in Legos during his hustling days. "Na small girl una day fear," he asked his driver, Musa, while counting bundles of cash one evening. "I go give her small money. She go calm." That same night, Alhaji took a shower with black soap, sprayed his expensive oud perfume, wore his cleanest kaftan, and drove himself to Mama Akudo's compound. He didn't knock. He whistled. 3 times. The curtain moved. Then the door creaked open. He stepped in. That was the last time anyone saw Alhaji with their eyes. But the strange thing was this. His Hilux was found parked neatly outside. His white slippers still placed at the entrance. Inside the room, silence. No sign of a struggle. No sign of a person. Only a small bowl of cola nuts, cracked open, and dry blood smeared across the floor in a spiral pattern. The next morning, Alhaji's wife, the first one, the one he still lived with, ran through the village barefoot, hair flying, eyes wild. She said her husband had called her around 2 a.m. But the voice on the phone wasn't his. It was deeper, slower, like a man talking underwater. And the voice whispered one sentence. "Don't cry for me. She showed me what I really am." The call ended. When she tried calling back, the line was dead. The police came. They searched. They questioned Akudo. But when they arrived at her room, she was sitting calmly on the floor, pounding yam in a wooden mortar. No blood. No bowl. No trace of Alhaji. One of the officers, Inspector Tolu, stepped into the room and immediately began sweating. He said the air felt heavy, like he had entered a house that remembered pain. Another officer found something under the bed. Not a knife. Not a gun. But a ring. Alhaji's wedding ring. Still warm. That night, the wind refused to blow in Abai. The trees stood still. Even the dogs didn't bark. But in the old well beside the mechanic's shed, where Alhaji usually parked his Hilux, the neighbors swore they heard his voice. Faint. Repeating the same sentence again and again. "She's older than the village. She's not what she seems. She's not what she seems. She's not what she seems." By morning, the well had gone dry. The mechanic moved his workshop. The driver Musa resigned and went back to Sokoto. No one entered the compound again after dark. But Akudo? She went to the market the next day, bought ripe plantains, smiled at the butcher, and greeted the pastor's son. Like nothing happened. Like no one had disappeared. Like the room didn't eat men whole. They called her Mama Binta. No one remembered her real name. She had been blind since before most of the young men in Abai were born. But she saw things. Not with her eyes. With her mind. With something deeper. She sat in the same corner of the market every day, wrapped in a brown wrapper with small cowrie shells tied into her hair. People brought her coins and salt. Not because she begged, but because she warned. She would whisper strange things to passers-by. "Your sister is pregnant. Don't let her cross the river. Don't eat meat on Thursday. It smells of blood. Tell your father to remove that mirror from his room." And every time, every single time, she was right. Even the local pastors avoided her. Even Madame Adi once said, "Binta doesn't see with eyes. She sees with memory." But on this day, the 7th since Akudo came to Abai, something shifted. Akudo came to buy goat meat. She walked past Mama Binta, humming softly. No one noticed. But Mama Binta did. The blind woman suddenly gasped, dropped the calabash of roasted groundnuts in her lap. Her hand shot into the air. Her milky white eyes rolled. Then she screamed. But not like a mad woman. She screamed names. Enin, Chika, Osandu, Ikin, Ojeki, Natazi, Obina. The names poured from her mouth like water from a broken calabash. Names of the dead. Names of those missing. Names that hadn't been spoken aloud in years. The entire market froze. The meat sellers dropped their knives. The fruit women stopped arranging oranges. "Shide call people way don die now," someone whispered. Mama Binta stood suddenly, which she never did. Her legs shook. Her eyes bled. Tiny red lines running down her cheeks like tears. Then she pointed, directly at Akudo. Though she couldn't see her. "You," she howled. "You walk in daylight, but you belong to the ones who crawl. You wear beauty like a garment, but your face has no name. You are not girl, you are gate." The wind screamed through the market. Thunder rumbled, even though the sky was clear. People began to scatter. Women grabbed their baskets. Men ran toward their bikes. Even the butcher dropped his cutlass. Akudo did not flinch. She stood there, holding her bag of meat, staring calmly at the blind woman. Then she smiled. A soft, gentle smile, but it made the hairs on everyone's skin rise. Mama Binta collapsed, frothing at the mouth, whispering in tongues no one recognized. They rushed her to the prayer house. She hasn't spoken since. But that night, the moon was red, and children in Abai dreamt of mirrors filled with fire. Everyone in Abai knew Madame Akudo. Big woman, loud voice, always chewing cola. She owned 3 canteens, had 5 sons, and never believed in nonsense. Ghost ko, na poverty day worry una. She always said when people whispered about evil spirits. So when strange things started happening in her compound, the compound where Akalugo was staying, she packed up and moved out. Let that girl stay there if she wants, Madame Akudo told everyone. Me, I like to sleep with 2 eyes closed. She moved to Upper Abai, behind the big Catholic church. Brand new compound. Tiled floor. Iron gates. She even got new tenants, mostly students and 1 nurse. Everything seemed normal again. But that's the thing about shadows. They don't need a house key to follow you. The very first night in her new place, Madame Akudo lit her lantern and sat on her veranda to eat roasted corn. She was humming an old Igbo song when she saw it. A blackbird, perched on her gate. No big deal, until she looked again, and it was no longer just 1. There were 3, then 5, then 9, all black, all watching her, eyes glowing, wings folded, silent. She spat. Hiss. Nonsense. Birds don't scare me. But that night, she dreamed. In her dream, she was back in her old compound. The kitchen was full of smoke. The walls were bleeding palm oil. She tried to run, but the door wouldn't open. Then she saw her. Akalugo, wearing white, standing inside the smoke, her eyes glowing like hot coals. And behind her, all the men who had vanished from Abai. They stood in a line, mouths open, tongues gone. Their hands were tied with red thread, their feet floating above the floor. Madame Akudo, Akalugo whispered, voice like wind through dry leaves. You gave me a room, but I was already there. When she woke up, Madame Akudo's mattress was soaked. Not with sweat, with blood. No wound, no injury, just red liquid leaking from her bedsheet. The priest said it was witchcraft. The herbalist said, something wants you to remember. Madame Akudo moved again, this time to a guest house outside town. But each night, the dream followed her. And every morning, more blackbirds perched on her window. She tried to burn the mattress, but it wouldn't catch fire. She tried to fast, but food appeared in her room even when she didn't cook. She even tried to curse Akalugo in public. But the next day, her tongue swelled so big, she couldn't speak. Doctors couldn't explain it. The nurse moved out. The students ran away. The priest stopped visiting. Now, Madame Akudo lives alone, in a room with no mirrors. She no longer chews cola. She barely speaks. And sometimes, at midnight, people say they hear her chanting. I opened the door and never closed it. I opened the door and never closed it. He came with confidence, with sneakers that cost more than the monthly rent of most Abai families, with a Sony mirrorless camera strapped to his chest, with followers, over 600,000 of them, on his YouTube channel. His name was Frank D. Real name, Franklin Daramola. But online, they called him City Lens. He was famous for visiting rural places and exposing the hidden darkness with HD video and catchy thumbnails. When the whispers about the Abai girl reached the internet, Frank's inbox was flooded. Go to Abai. Check out the girl with the gray eyes. Document the curse. He thought it was perfect content. He thought it would go viral. He had no idea Abai doesn't like cameras, especially not ones pointed at things that should not be seen. Day 1, arrival in Abai. Frank rode into the village in a red Sienna bus. He wore sunglasses, white headphones, and a smile. Say hello to the camera, people, he shouted, pointing at a group of farmers. They stared blankly. One woman turned and spat on the ground. Frank laughed it off. You can feel the tension, guys. This is gonna be crazy. He found a cheap guest room, set up his gear, and told his audience, I'm going to find Akalugo. I'll talk to her. I'll get the real story. He filmed everything. The dusty road, the old market stalls, the eerie tree near Madame Adi's shrine, even Mama Binta mumbling to herself in the corner. He titled his first video, The Girl Who Eats Men, Night 1 in Abai. It got 80,000 views in 3 hours. But by nightfall, strange things started. Movie camera night footage, timestamp, 1:42 a.m. Frank's camera, still rolling, caught something odd. He was sleeping, or trying to, but the door to his room creaked open by itself. Wind blew in, even though the windows were shut. A black bird flew in, then perched on his camera. Suddenly, the screen glitched. The frame froze for 3 seconds. Then, a face appeared. Not Frank's. A girl's. Gray eyes. Lips not moving, but you could hear her voice. She doesn't want to be filmed, the voice whispered. She's older than memory. She doesn't like light. The camera went black. The footage ended. Day 2. The disappearance. Frank didn't come out of his room. Not for food. Not for water. Not for the interview he promised with Madame Akudo. By afternoon, the guest house manager broke open his door. Frank was gone. The bed untouched. The camera still rolling. But here's the strangest part. The lens was covered from inside. With skin. Human skin. They called the police. They searched. All they found was his phone, shattered, screen flickering. One video remained. A short clip, only 15 seconds long. It showed Frank's face, pale, eyes wide, whispering in the dark. She's not one person. She's 1,000 voices. She's in the air, in the mirrors, in the silence. I saw her real face, and now I don't know mine. The screen glitched, then went blank. Frank was never found, but his camera uploads every week. At exactly 2:13 a.m. Each time, a short clip. No voice. Just static. And gray eyes in the distance. It started with a game. A harmless game. Children in Abai didn't have iPads or cartoons, but they had imagination. They turned banana leaves into money, sticks into guns, and mirrors into magic. One day, during recess at Abai Nursery School, little Chabiz, only 6 years old, found a cracked mirror behind the classroom window. It was old, jagged, wrapped in spiderwebs. "Let's play dare," one girl said. "Touch the mirror and say your name backward," another added. They dared each other one by one. But when it was Chabiz's turn, he didn't just touch it. He stared, and stared, and stared. The other children began to get uncomfortable. "Bees," one girl whispered. "Say your name backward." Still he stared. Then suddenly, he gasped and fell back. The mirror didn't break, but something inside it rippled, like water. The teacher rushed in. She took the mirror and threw it away behind the school fence. But that night, Chabiz refused to sleep. "Mummy," he whispered, "there's someone else in my eyes." His mother thought it was a joke. She laughed, until she saw what he meant. He sat in front of her small mirror, and she saw it too. His reflection blinked before he did, smiled when he was frowning, opened its mouth, and whispered something. But no sound came out. Terrified, she took him to Pastor Eam at St. Jude's Prayer Chapel. But the moment they walked into the prayer room, the crucifix above the altar turned upside down. Oil bottles shattered. The candles blew out. And Chabiz began to scream, not in pain, but in laughter. Laughter that didn't sound like his. Deep. Ancient. The pastor said, "This child is looking through a gate not meant for children." He asked the mother, "Where did he see her?" The mother asked, "See who?" "The girl," the pastor said. "The one with gray eyes." They prayed, fasted, anointed the child. But nothing worked. Each night, Chabiz would sit before any shiny surface, pots, spoons, even puddles, and whisper, "I'm coming back. I'm coming through. I'm wearing him like cloth." One day, the mother smashed every mirror in their home, but she forgot the one on her powder case. And that was the night she vanished. Chabiz was found alone, covered in powder, smiling. When asked what happened to his mother, he said, "She walked into the mirror. She didn't like what she saw, so she stayed." He no longer speaks like a child. His voice is deeper. He speaks Igbo fluently, though no one taught him. Now, other children avoid him. Even dogs won't bark when he walks by. And at night, the women selling food near his compound say they hear 2 voices coming from his room. One small, one old, both chanting the same thing. Akalugo opens the door. We only walk through. He was a war veteran. Odagwa Ikiocha, a man whose name once carried weight across Abai and even parts of Ugheli and Enugu. He fought in the Civil War, carried scars across his back like whip marks. He didn't believe in stories. He believed in actions. So when he heard the rumors about Akalugo, he spat and said, "If she's evil, we burn her." Simple. Everyone begged him to leave it alone. Even Madame Adi said, "She is not from where fire fears." But Odogwu was tired of the fear choking Abai. Every night, women scream. Men vanish. Children draw circles in the dirt. "Enough," he shouted in the town square. He gathered palm oil, diesel, a tire, and 3 of his old soldier friends. "We will drag her out, tie her, set her on fire. And if she's human, God will protect her. If she is not, fire will speak." They set the date. Saturday night. The moon would be half full. He said, "We strike before she completes her circle." People watched from their windows that night. No one dared stop them. No one even blinked. They waited outside her compound. Akalugo stepped out. No fear. No scream. Just that same faded yellow wrapper. Her gray eyes glowing in the moonlight. "Come with us," Odogwu said. "Your time is up." She said nothing. She walked toward them, calmly, as if she had seen this moment before. They bound her arms with chain. They carried her to the abandoned mechanic yard, where no light reached. Odogwu poured the oil. His men wrapped her in a tire. He held the match. "I give you one chance," he said. "Say who you really are." Akalugo looked up at him and smiled. That same soft, dangerous smile. Then she whispered, "I was burned once, before fire learned pain." Odogwu struck the match. He dropped it. The tire burst into flames. People say the fire rose so high, they could see it from the riverbank. It roared like a lion. It turned red, then blue, then white. Everyone thought it was done. But when the fire died down, Akalugo was gone. No chains, no ash, no bone. Just her wrapper, folded neatly beside a burnt-out can of diesel. And Odogwu? He was on his knees, face frozen in terror, skin pale, mouth open. He wouldn't speak for 3 days. When he did, all he could say was, "She whispered a name, my real name, the one my mother only used before she died." And then she stepped into the fire, and the fire knelt. He left Abai 2 weeks later. But some say he didn't go far. They say he walks the edge of the village at night, barefoot, mumbling, carrying her wrapper under his arm. He tells no one what he saw. But if you ask him about Akalugo, he will cry, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Madame Adi's shrine had stood for over 60 years, but the land beneath it had been sacred long before her bones ever entered the world. In Abai, people said, "Don't walk the shrine path after dark. The trees remember what you forget." But one hot afternoon, 2 young men decided they didn't care about stories. Yuzo and Nanso, brothers. They had returned from Legos, full of money and swagger. "We're not afraid of bush magic," Yuzo laughed. They wanted to build a guest house right beside the shrine, for tourists and ghost hunters. They didn't ask permission. Not from Madame Adi. Not from the ancestors. Not from Akalugo. They brought in machines. Diggers. Shovels. Workers. And that was when the forest changed. The air thickened. Birds stopped singing. Even the insects went quiet. But they kept digging. On the second day, the digging crew struck something hard beneath the roots of the shrine tree. "A stone?" Nanso asked. "No, not a stone. It was a flat black surface, smooth, too perfect to be natural. A lid." They cleared the earth around it, revealing markings. Symbols. Some looked like ancient Nsibiti, but others, no one recognized. A worker named Pascal said, "This is not meant to be touched. Something sleeps here." Yuzo laughed and said, "Let's wake it up then." They pried open the lid. And that was the mistake. Inside was a staircase, spiraling down into darkness. Cool wind rushed out, not warm like from underground, but icy, like breath. One man put a flashlight in. The light flickered, then died. Still, Yuzo insisted they go down. He wanted to be the first to capture history. So they descended. 4 men went in. Only one came out. He wasn't the same. His name was Kaode, the youngest of the workers. He emerged hours later, barefoot, covered in black dust. Eyes wide, lips bleeding. He didn't speak. But on his tongue, someone had carved a symbol. The same as on the lid. He would only whisper one word. Akalugo. And then he began to dig with his hands. In the air. In the dirt. On walls. He dug and dug, until his fingers bled. Until he disappeared one night, last seen walking toward the river, smiling. Yuzo and the others? They never came out. When the villagers returned to seal the hole, they found the black surface closed, as if no one had opened it. But that night, the shrine caught fire. No lightning, no rain, just sudden flames that danced in a spiral, like the staircase below. Madame Adi stood, and watched it burn. And all she said was, "She warned you. That which lives below belongs to her." The forest has changed since then. The animals walk backward. Leaves don't fall, they float upward. And people say if you stand near the spot long enough, you hear voices in a language no one speaks anymore. They say Akudo didn't come from that shrine. She was waiting for it to be opened, so her sisters could rise. It began at 3:01 a.m. No wind, no thunder, no warning. But something shifted. The air became too still. The walls hummed. And when people blinked open sleepy eyes, they saw her. Not in flesh, but in glass, in mirrors, in screens, in water bowls, in the shine of cooking pots, in the glint of a child's eye. Her face, Akudo, her gray eyes staring back from every reflective surface in Abai. Some screamed, some prayed, some ran outside in confusion, but even the puddles on the road showed her reflection. She was everywhere. She didn't move. She just stared, and that was worse. Church Madam Adi, who hadn't left her shrine in 13 years, suddenly stepped outside into the square. Her lips trembling, her eyes wide. "It is not her anymore," she whispered. "It is them." A teacher at Abai High fainted in the staff room, because on the back of her phone case, instead of her own selfie, was Akudo smiling. Not the usual smile. A wide, cold, knowing smile. The kind a lion gives a goat before dawn. Movie camera in the homes of people with televisions, the screens turned on by themselves. No static, just her face. She blinked once, then spoke, but without sound. Her lips moved, and everyone heard something different. Some heard, "Remember me." Others heard, "You broke the seal." And a few, a chosen few, heard nothing. They simply began to walk toward her, wherever she was, like sleepwalkers. One woman, Ngozi, a 55-year-old widow, walked out of her home, barefoot, and stood by her well. She leaned over the water and said, "Take me." Then she jumped in. They haven't found her body to this day. Just a faint trail of gray smoke rising from the bottom of the well. Sun morning never came. That day, Abai's skies forgot the sun. Roosters crowed, but the light did not rise. The entire village lived inside a dull blue dawn. Shadows stretched unnaturally long. Clock stopped at 3:01. Children refused to speak. Some drew spirals on walls. Others sat in silence, pointing at the corners of the room where no one else saw anything, except one thing. A girl, standing, watching, not blinking. Coffin, then the deaths began. The first was Chief Olama. Heart attack, they said, but his body was found kneeling, hands clasped, eyes wide open, in gray. The next was F. the tailor. He sewed Akudo's name into 15 dresses before sewing the thread into his own skin. They buried him. But the next day, his coffin was empty. People fled Abai in the following weeks. But the strange thing was, once they left the village border, they didn't remember why they left. And then, they came back. Every single one of them. When asked why, they answered in a whisper, "She hasn't finished with us." Scroll, and somewhere in the abandoned house by the old church, a child painted the village skyline. With no sun, no people, only one shape standing tall in every corner, a woman in yellow, waiting. He had been gone for 20 years, exiled, banished, forgotten by most, but not by her. Father Alhaji was once the youngest priest to serve at St. Disma's church in Abai. He was a man of fire, not the kind that warmed, but the kind that warned. He had seen things back then, things that made him tremble even when he prayed. And when he tried to warn the village, they laughed, called him mad, said, "You've read too many books." He spoke of a girl with gray eyes, born every 500 years. A vessel, a gate, a key. He said her name once, just once in a homily. And that same night, the church bell rang by itself for 3 hours. The next morning, he was gone. Rumors said he'd gone to Calabar. Others said he lived in the mountains with monks. Some whispered he was dead, but he was not. He returned on the second morning after the night of gray eyes, wearing the same black cassock, carrying only a Bible, and a clay pot wrapped in white cloth. When he stepped back into Abai, the wind stilled. Children stopped mid-laughter. Even the birds perched silently. People gathered quickly, some afraid, some hopeful, most confused. "Father Alhaji," someone shouted. "She's back. What do we do?" He looked around the village slowly, then whispered, "She never left. You just forgot." They brought him into Madame Adi's burnt shrine, where the earth was still hot and pulsing. There, he placed the clay pot on the ground. Inside this, he said, is the only thing that can seal her again. What is it? Adi asked. He looked up, his eyes sunken and glassy. Her true name, he replied. Silence. You see, names have power in Abai. But some names are not meant for human tongues. She is not a witch, he said. She is a whispering gate. They speak through her. And once her name is spoken in full, the gate swings wide. Someone asked, then why would you bring it? He smiled sadly. Because someone already said it. A child. He opened the clay pot, just a crack. And from it, a single sound escaped. Not a scream. Not a whisper. Something older. The sound of a language without vowels. Of stone grinding against time. Of thunder wrapped in silk. Everyone fell to the ground. Madame Adi began bleeding from her ears. Father Ajik closed the pot quickly and sealed it with holy oil. I can't stop her now, he said. I can only slow her. That night, he rang the church bell. Even though St. Dismas was a ruin, the bell rang clearly through all of Abai. 13 times. Each toll shook windows. Cracked concrete. Made babies cry. When it stopped, a child from Omuobeli quarter walked up to Father Ajik and stared at him with pale gray eyes. I know your name too, she said. And then she vanished. He dropped to his knees. Trembling. Crying. Muo, he whispered. They've entered more vessels. The next morning, Father Ajik was gone again. The clay pot lay broken at the altar of the ruined church. Its contents, ash. Nothing more. But on the floor, scrawled in ash and blood, were 3 words. She remembers everything. When all else failed, when priests vanished, fires danced backward, and babies whispered in forgotten tongues, the elders called for something Abai had never done before. A silent festival. Yes, silence. No drums. No flutes. No dancing feet on dusty ground. Not even the clapping of hands. For one whole day, the people would gather in stillness. The idea came from the oldest elder alive, Neka the Deaf. She had not spoken in over 40 years. She'd lived near the riverbank in a mud house covered with moss and carvings only she understood. She wrote her words on kola leaves with ash. When they came to her, asking for guidance, she handed them a single leaf. On it was written, only silence can teach you what noise has buried. And that was how the Festival of Silence was born. Some behind cloud the day began before dawn. Every household placed a white cloth on their doors. Mothers tied palm fronds to their children's wrists so they wouldn't speak by mistake. At the square, everyone gathered. White wrappers, bare feet, no music, no talking, only breath, and eyes watching eyes. Even the town crier, who had not missed a sunrise in 30 years, stood in silence, holding his iron bell but refusing to strike it. And for the first time in living memory, Abai was quiet. So quiet, you could hear the insects crawl. You could hear wind move through skin. You could hear the river hum. And then, you could hear something else. Something that had been waiting. Water wave the river changed. It began with bubbles. Tiny ones, rising like thoughts. Then came the tremble, not in the water, but in the earth beneath it. And then, the river groaned. Yes, it made a sound like a woman clearing her throat in a deep cave. The water rose. Not in waves, but in shapes. Shapes of arms. Of fingers. Of something trying to crawl out. The elders knelt. Children screamed silently, covering their mouths with trembling hands. Then, from the center of the river, came a figure. Tall, dripping in silver water. Hair woven with strands of ash. Eyes gray. But it wasn't Akudo. This one was older. Her skin was cracked like dry earth. Her mouth never opened. But when she lifted her hands, the entire village heard a voice inside their heads. Your silence has called us. Now we remember your names. She pointed to the ground. A crack appeared at her feet, stretching from the riverbank all the way to the village square. From it came laughter. Childlike. Hungry. Familiar. People turned and saw, painted across the walls of Abai, a new symbol. A spiral wrapped in a question mark. That night, no one slept. Even the shadows refused to settle. And at the far end of the market square, someone placed a baby on the ground, wrapped in banana leaves. The baby had no name, but her eyes were gray. They swore they took it to the grave. But the grave refused to hold the secret. You see, Abai had 4 living elders who walked with staffs carved from the same sacred tree. Their names were known to all. Elder Kanu, Elder Musa, Elder Neka, Yes, the deaf one, and Elder Teo. Each was over 80 years old. Each had lived through 2 plagues. Each had survived the firestorm of 1962. And each had watched a girl die under the old mango tree, many, many years ago. A girl with gray eyes. A girl they claimed was cursed. They told the village she was a thief, a liar, a child of the river demons. But that wasn't the truth. The truth they buried beneath mango roots. And a stone they placed on her grave with no name. No markings. Just silence. For over 40 years, they said nothing. But now, with Akudo back, with river women rising and silence becoming louder than thunder, the guilt began to rot their bones. Elder Musa was the first to break. His legs began to shake uncontrollably. He couldn't eat. He saw mangoes bleeding in his dreams. He called the others. "We must go back," he said, "before she brings the others." At dawn, they walked to the grove. The mango tree had always been the tallest in Abai. Its roots reached into other realms, people said. Children were forbidden to climb it. But now, it was gone. Not chopped. Not felled. Just gone. Where it once stood, there was now a massive stone altar. Black. Slick. Pulsing. And bleeding. Yes, bleeding. From thin cracks across its surface, thick red fluid leaked. It smelled of iron and salt, and memory. Elder Neka, who hadn't spoken in decades, began to hum. A low, broken lullaby. She fell to her knees, placed her ear to the stone, and whispered, "Obu Nwanyahu." "It is her." The others trembled. "She knows we lied," Elder Kanu said. "She was not cursed. She was chosen, and we buried her before she bloomed." They told the truth that morning. That Akalugo was not the first. That in 1978, a girl named Nkaruka had been born with gray eyes. At the age of 10, she began to speak languages no one taught her. She drew maps of places no one had ever seen. She stared into rivers and described things buried beneath them. One day, she told the elders, "You built this village on stolen breath." The next week, they gathered the people, declared her a danger, and they stoned her under the mango tree. They lied to the villagers, told them she attacked a child, told them she tried to poison the town's water. The mango tree swallowed her bones. The earth held her silence. Until now. Now, the altar bled, and the ground beneath it whispered, "Give us the 4 who lied, or Abai will lose its name." That night, Elder Musa vanished from his compound. His walking stick was found stuck upright in the center of his bed, covered in ants. Ants with gray eyes. Elder Teo was next. He walked into the forest behind his house and never came back. But his slippers kept walking back and forth for 3 hours before stopping. Elder Neka simply stopped breathing. No struggle. No gasp. She smiled as her spirit left. Only Elder Kanu remained. He locked himself inside the town's meeting hall. But even the walls whispered. In the morning, the door burst open. And inside, there was no Kanu. Only a puddle of water. And a spiral carved into the wooden floor. Still wet, still dripping. At first, it was just one child. Chimobi, a 5-year-old boy known for hiding in pots and pretending to be a rat, was the first to rise. It happened just after midnight. His mother, Amara, had woken up to pee and walked past his mat. She noticed something strange. Chimobi's wrapper was gently fluttering in the air, as though someone had placed a fan directly beneath him. She blinked, stepped closer, and saw it. Her son was no longer lying down. He was floating, 6 inches above the mat, spinning slowly, his arms out, his lips moving, but no sound. She screamed. Her husband ran in, expecting thieves or rats. But when he saw his son hovering in the dark like a prayer gone wrong, he dropped to his knees and started shouting Bible verses. The neighbors came, and by morning, so did others. Because Chimobi was not the only one. By 4 a.m., a total of 12 children had risen, none of them conscious, none of them able to be pulled down. Parents used ropes, wrappers, baskets. Nothing worked. If you held them down, they'd rise again the moment you let go, like leaves defying gravity. Cloud by noon, it got worse. The children started moving. Upward. Slowly. Gently. Like balloons you almost forgot to tie. And then, one girl, Aisha, age 9, rose past the rooftops. Her father ran outside, crying, "Come down. Aisha, come down, my angel." She didn't respond. She just floated higher, until her white nightgown was a speck against the dull sky. She never came down. People stood in the market, pointing up. They saw a shape where she vanished, a spiral made of clouds, spinning gently in the sky. By sunset, over 40 children were affected. The school closed down. Mothers slept with their kids tied to mortar stones. Some used chains. One desperate father filled his son's pockets with sand. But the children still floated. Sometimes during naps. Sometimes while eating. One boy floated mid-bath. His head stayed just above the water, like something unseen held him up. No one could explain it. Even Madame Adi's apprentice, now acting as the village diviner, said quietly, "They're being called upward. She's building a staircase of innocence." Warning the real fear began when they started speaking in their sleep. All of them. Every floating child would whisper the same thing, over and over, night after night. Return her name. Return her bones. Return what was taken. Some parents went mad. Others packed bags to flee Abai. But the children wouldn't leave. If you tried to carry them past the village border, they became heavy. Too heavy to lift. One baby weighed over 300 pounds in his mother's arms as she tried to cross the bush path to Abohia. Once she turned back, he became light again, feather-light. And always whispering, "Return her name. Return her bones." Scroll on the 7th night, it happened. One child, Ifani, age 8, rose again. But this time, he did not float gently. He shot upward like a slingshot. He screamed once, not in fear, but in joy. "Mother, I see her." And then he vanished. Into the clouds. Never to return. His mother collapsed. The ground beneath her cracked. And on the walls of their home appeared, once more, the now familiar spiral, drawn in white chalk no one owned. And the village finally realized. Akalugo was no longer asking. She was taking. When a village starts to lose its children to the sky, something inside the adults snaps. Something ancient. Something primal. And so, in the dead of night, with no drums, no light, no announcements, the elders who remained, and the brave few still willing to act gathered beneath Abai Market. A hidden place. An old chamber no one had used since the colonial war. Originally built as a hideout. Now reborn as a war room. They called themselves the Spiral Council. 20 men. 12 women. One child. A mute girl with silver anklets who had seen the gray-eyed woman in a dream. They lit only one oil lamp, placed at the center of a dusty wooden table. On the walls, the spiral symbol had been drawn again. Fresh. Wet. Still dripping chalk dust. But now, it wasn't just a spiral. It had marks. Arrows. Numbers. A strange line of symbols circling the inner coil. One of the elders, Mama Igioma, had studied sigils during her time in Benin. She stepped forward, eyes wide. "This isn't just a sign," she whispered. "It's a map. A map of Abai." The spiral marked the village itself, coiling inward towards something buried. She traced the curve with her finger. "This leads to the center," she said. "And the center isn't the shrine. It's what lies beneath it." Everyone went silent. Then came the boy Arins, 12 years old. One of the floating children, but tied to a sack of rice to keep him grounded. He stood up, still half asleep. And with chalk clutched in his hand, he drew one final mark on the wall. 12 o'clock. A small clock symbol, pointed directly at midnight. "What does it mean?" someone asked. The mute girl with silver anklets blinked slowly and began to hum. It wasn't a song anyone recognized. It was older than songs. A melody that didn't need words, just memory. And as she hummed, the spiral began to glow faintly. Not light, but warmth. It pulsed in rhythm with her voice. Then someone shouted, "Look! The clock!" The clock drawn by the boy was changing. Its hand, which pointed at midnight, was now ticking. Tick, tick, tick. It moved slowly, but it moved. And when it passed the first mark, the oil lamp went out. They were thrown into darkness. Total. Swallowing. Then a voice. Not loud. Not angry. Just knowing. She's not asking for revenge. She's asking for justice. Balance. It was Madame Adi's apprentice. She held a piece of black cloth in her hands, taken from Akalugo's wrapper the night she vanished. "She left this behind," the apprentice said. "It wasn't an accident. It's a piece of her binding." "Binding?" asked a man. "Yes," the apprentice nodded. "Someone tried to seal her. Once. Long ago. But they didn't finish the ritual. They buried her body, but not her soul. That's why she's still here, in echoes. In children. In the river." She was interrupted. A deep silence followed, until the spiral flared again, this time revealing a final mark at the very center. A symbol none could translate, until the mute girl stepped forward, knelt by the wall, and traced the symbol with her finger. She looked back, then spoke her first word in 9 years. Name. They finally understood. The spiral wasn't just a map. It wasn't just a curse. It was a question, and the answer was her name. Not just Akudo. That was the name she gave them. A cover, a shadow of who she was. To stop what was coming, or to understand it, they had to find her full, true, original name. The name whispered at her birth. The name erased from memory and paper and earth. And so the spiral council split into 3 groups. Each one sent to a different part of Abai. Each one with only a few hours left before the spiral reached its midnight mark. Hourglass Not Done Group 1, the record house. The old Abai records were kept in a colonial-era concrete building, sealed for years due to a termite infestation. Elder Funmi led this group, a former midwife, now too weak to stand without help. She remembered a girl born with gray eyes in 1980. A birth with no cries, no placenta, only silence. Inside the record house, the floor was covered in broken ledgers and decayed parchment. They searched page after page, flipping through birth records, death logs, naming ceremonies. At last, they found it. Female child, born 10:37 p.m. under full moon. No father listed. Name, Oruwasiachenwanyi. Not Akudo. Oruwasiachenwanyi. The name meant, she who gathers blood and light. It wasn't just a name. It was a title, a prophecy. When Funmi whispered the name aloud, the record house shuddered. Literally, papers flew into the air. A window cracked from top to bottom. And in the dust, a message appeared on the wall. To speak her name is to open the gate. Hourglass Not Done Group 2, the riverbed graves. Another team, led by Madame Adi's apprentice, went to the river. They had received a dream. A vision of a tomb made of water. Buried not beneath, but within. The river's edge was unusually low that day, revealing old bones. Some belonged to animals. Others did not. They began digging near a mangled fig tree. Hours passed. Fingers bled. The river hissed. And then they found it. A box, wrapped in iron cloth, tied with hair. Human hair. Inside was a single item. A lock of gray hair, smooth, glowing faintly. Attached was a tag, etched in a forgotten dialect. This is her voice. When the world denies her name, she will speak with the tongue of winds. Before they could reseal the box, the water around them rose. Fast, like it was angry. A whirlpool spun in reverse, spiraling inward. One boy fell in. They never found his body. Only his voice, calling his own name from beneath the river. Hourglass Not Done Group 3, the Shrine of Forgotten Mothers. The third group, smaller, entered a clay compound near the forest, where mothers who had lost children used to go and pray. There, they found the mural, hidden beneath layers of soot. A painting of a woman, painted in gray and white, sitting with 12 children floating behind her like moons. Underneath was a phrase. She cannot leave until her name is returned in full breath. They lit a candle, and one of the old women, Mama Deka, breathed the name slowly. Oru, Acha, Nwanyi. The candle flickered, then turned black. Smoke poured from its top like a scream. And in the distance, from the direction of the river, a sound rose. It was not thunder. It was not song. It was a name being spoken by the wind itself. Oru, Acha, Nwanyi. And the spiral, back in the underground chamber, began to bleed. Not red, but silver. Glowing silver, dripping in long trails that floated upward. And the mute girl, still watching, said, she knows they found her. But names don't end stories. Names begin them. Tick, tick, tick. 12 o'clock. Midnight struck. And Abai paused. Not the kind of pause you feel when everyone goes quiet. Not the hush of late night. This was different. Time itself, the very air, stopped. A breeze froze mid-spin. A baby's cry hung in the wind like a dangling thread. Flies stopped buzzing over a corpse at the town's edge. And in the sky, the stars rearranged themselves into a spiral. The clock had turned, and Abai was no longer in the present. Hourglass Not Done people began to move backward. Yes, backward. One woman in the market, Ngozi the cloth seller, screamed when she saw her own arms undoing the fabric she had just folded. A man harvesting yams found them climbing back into the soil. Even the river began to reverse. Water flowed upstream. Fish swam backward. The moon blinked twice. Inside the underground spiral council chamber, the walls groaned. The spiral glowed bright silver now, a slow, pulsating breath. And the mute girl, no longer mute, stood calmly, holding her wrists like they ached. "She's unsealing time," she whispered. "Who?" someone asked. Oruasiachenwanyi. Her true self. We said her name, and now, the story is replaying itself. She wants us to see. The visions begin. Across the village, people saw things. Not dreams. Not illusions. Real things, from the past. Madame Adi's apprentice stood in her mother's hut and saw a young girl with gray eyes being smuggled in through the back door. "She mustn't be seen," the mother whispered. "They'll call her evil." In the shrine, an old priest suddenly found himself young again, standing before a council, warning them. "If you bury her name, you'll wake her spirit." At the river's edge, a fisherman who lost his son watched his own memory unfold. A girl walking across the river surface, barefoot, unbothered, smiling, and behind her, thousands of voices. Not screams, not songs. Names, 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 names. The names of women, of girls, of children buried too soon. Buried with no stories. Buried with no justice. It was a parade of memory. Abai wasn't haunted. Abai was layered. A village built on the bones of forgotten truths. Cyclone then, it appeared. Above the village, in the clouds, the spiral took full shape. 3 miles wide. Glowing. Turning slowly like a celestial eye. And from its center, someone descended. Floating. Graceful. Wrapped in silver cloth that shimmered like water. She didn't touch the ground. She hovered just above it. Enough to be seen. Enough to be feared. The children who had floated before? They rose again. Every single one. From every hut. Every mat. Tied or not, they rose. They floated in formation, circling her like stars around a moon. People screamed. Some prayed. Some fell on their knees. She looked at no one. Yet everyone felt seen. Oruasiachenwanyi. The mute girl whispered from the market floor. She's no longer angry. She's remembering. Then a voice. Deep. Clear. Not male. Not female. Just complete. "You buried my bones," it said, "but forgot my name. You built markets with my blood, and called my silence peace." Now, the spiral in the sky began to spin faster, and the ground beneath the council chamber cracked. From it rose a man. Old. Thin. His eyes gone, replaced with light. Pure, white, blinding. He said one thing. I was the last to hold her hand. She forgave me before she slept. "Who are you?" someone shouted. "I am her witness." The spiral's glow became unbearable. Children wept without sound. Dogs howled, and then stopped mid-howl. And the clock symbol on the spiral's wall began to turn again. Backward. 12 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 1 o'clock. "Time is unraveling," whispered Elder Funmi. We didn't just wake her, we woke everything. And above them, the voice of Oruasiachenwanyi rang out once more. "Let there be memory." And Abai was swallowed in light. But not fire. Not death. Memory.